Well, welcome to the PricePlow podcast. It is Monday, September 12th of 2022, and we have a rock star crew here. I'm with Raza Bashir, the VP of Scientific Affairs and Product Innovation at Iovate and MuscleTech, and modern-day Renaissance man Shawn Wells, who's no stranger to our podcast, who comes to us normally from NMB Nutrition, but today from Ingenious Ingredients as the inventor of the ingredient that MuscleTech is using in their new IQ series of supplements. It's known as enfinity. Oh, you have a real tub there. He's showing it on the YouTube channel for those, let's say, on the audio feed. It's known as enfinity, and it is Paraxanthine. And we are going to talk about this new dietary supplement ingredient that Shawn has invented or co-invented. And MuscleTech is the first one to have it. Ben and I are here on the channel. We've been using it, and we are loving it. So welcome to the podcast, guys. We want to talk about everything about Paraxanthine today. Talk about the science, how it's different from caffeine, because this is being used as a caffeine replacement, and then talk about the products that MuscleTech is launching that has it and everything else. And before I talk anymore, I want to say that in episode 48 with Shawn Wells, July 27th of 2021, a little bit over a year ago, Shawn told us he had something coming, and this is it. So this is how we've making a full circle here for those of you who've been listening to us for a while. It's been over a year, and finally the stuff that Shawn was hyping back then is here, and it's awesome.
You were the first to hear about it, Mike.
I greatly appreciate it and greatly love the 200 milligram samples, but I'm very excited that we have 300 milligrams of the MuscleTech pre-workout. So I don't know how to kick it off and everything, but that's pretty much our introductions. I guess what everyone here is most interested in is really what is enfinity, what is Paraxanthine. So if one of you two gentlemen can take over, if you want to do any more introductions than that, feel free to. But I would like to eventually just learn about this ingredient and talk about the differences between this and caffeine and how it may be better for your workout.
I've actually heard Shawn talk a decent amount about caffeine and its effect on the Industrial Revolution. I think I'm saying that right, but the productivity with caffeine, and I found it wildly fascinating, so much that I turned it off, hoping that we could talk about that today. So I do think a really good train of thought is to talk about, because caffeine is such a just staple in everyone's lives, whether it's pre-workout, whether it's energy drinks or coffee. Everyone is familiar with the effects of caffeine and maybe familiar with the negative effects of caffeine. So a lot of what we do with supplements is solving problems. So maybe if we could talk about what kind of problem does Infinity solve in the caffeine subject of the world.
Perfect.
If that's a good start.
A scoop right now.
By the way, Raza, before I get into it, I've been, speaking of dry scooping, sometimes I'm just doing this I'm just eating the powder.
I did the same thing yesterday.
Anyway,
great flavor tech.
It's an amazing product, of which Paraxanthine Infinity is one ingredient, but it's a really great formula. But that's a great point, Ben, about the omnipresence of caffeine. And it would not be a $1 trillion market if it wasn't something that was so effective and so important to where we are in society. And if you think about, like you were just bringing up, the importance of caffeine, and it did fuel the Industrial Revolution. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, people were drinking during the day, and this shifted that completely. And the Pope ended up taking a positive pass on caffeine and saying it's okay to use, and that changed everything across the face of Europe. And the Royal Stock Exchange in the UK was fueled a lot by caffeine as well. The third shift essentially was fueled by caffeine. There's so much, like, we would not have this capitalistic society, this industrialistic society, this society of growth without that. If you took away the third shift, if you took away the productivity, and not only did it get more productive, like I said, they were almost anti-productive, being drunk through most of the day in Europe. If you changed all this by removing caffeine, we wouldn't have the society we have. Like, we may not have electric cars. We may not have airplanes. We may not have all of these different tech sectors, Walmart and Amazon and all the logistics. I mean, just think about how important caffeine is. Not only that, think about how we meet. There's really two liquids that get us to meet, right? It's alcohol and coffee. We meet at coffee shops. Hey, let's meet and have coffee. I want to chill and have coffee. Hey, I want to get work done. Let's get it done at the coffee shop. or at the bar, right? I mean, these substances are so ingrained into our lives, and it's so important to have essentially alcohol and caffeine throughout the last several hundred years, especially, that to deny them would be silly. And what paraxanthine solves is that for about 59% of the population, they are not fast metabolizers, meaning they're not metabolizing caffeine well. And so what happens is they're stuck more in this state of caffeine versus going to paraxanthine, which is where you see the majority of the benefits. And you're avoiding these other metabolites of theophylline and theobromine. And theophylline in particular, side effect ridden. It's actually a bronchodilator. It's a controlled substance. And so you get a lot of these side effects that you don't want from it. And so avoiding that is highly ideal, but it's not even that. Like when you're talking about removing caffeine, theophylline, theobromine, you're also removing all those metabolites thereafter. And there's a couple more stages of metabolites as well that we need to study. But the net effect, when you just go to paraxanthine in and of itself, is a much cleaner experience. And this is true across the board. And not only is it a cleaner experience, but we're avoiding that bio-individuality. And if you look at like the CYP1A2 gene, which is the cytochrome P450 1A2 enzyme, where you have the conversion of caffeine to paraxanthine, there are massive differences there. So that's what I'm talking about with that fast versus slow metabolizer gene. But there's also some other SNPs, other genes that you want to look at too, like the ADORA2A gene. And then there's just sensitivities that people have with things like anxiety, with insomnia, with tachycardia or hypertension, that can make them sensitive. And when you add all these things up, my numbers are roughly that about 80% of people are not dealing with caffeine well. I'm not saying it's bad. And obviously caffeine, again, so important. It got us here. There's a reason it's so popular, and there's just a better, cleaner solution now.
So awesome. I love what you say. A wise man once told me, and he noted that if you notice, societies on the upswing are often on stimulants, and societies on the downswing are often on depressants. And I don't want to get too much into drug talk, but you look at some of the music and art created in the 80s and 90s, it's pretty clear that a lot of it's cocaine induced. And some of the stuff that's been happening as we've like increased opiate use, for instance, has not been as productive. So I've never really thought about it that far back. I was really only thinking of it in terms of art and music in the 80s and 90s. But without even like hearing what you're saying, I'm a complete subscriber. Is theophylline going to it's got a way longer half-life. So if you're a slow metabolizer, is that the problem, or is the chemical itself the problem? And we're kind of like working around it. A two-part question, I guess. And then the second part is like, is any of the paraxanthine getting metabolized into theobromine or theophylline?
These are great questions, and there's a lot of exploration happening on our end. We're working with Dr. Kolewa. It's Cholewa. Look him up. Really,
he did all the betaine studies, right?
Yeah, really brilliant research going on right now with him and this whole metabolizer gene. And when you break apart these studies, and I'll get into your question in just a second, this is a great lead-in, is that you see the difference between these metabolizer groups. We were always wondering why there was, the data was somewhat equivocal on these caffeine studies. You get like the hyper responders and not. And doesn't matter whether we're looking at cognitive performance or ergogenic/athletic performance, we would be seeing this massive variance. And we were wondering why all the time, like, why is it? And we thought maybe it's because of the adaptation effect. Maybe it's just, they use a ton of caffeine. That's why. It's literally this bio-individuality of the genetic differences on how you metabolize caffeine. And so when you break that apart and you actually have the data on the caffeine metabolism per person, these various SNPs, then you can tell who's going to perform well and who's not. The fast responders, the fast metabolizers, sorry, they're the ones that are getting the great results. They're the ones that are getting the cognitive results and the athletic performance. And what's crazy is not only are the slow metabolizers not getting the results, they're actually getting declination in performance. We see negative cognitive performance. We see negative athletic performance. And so once we understand this, now this explains why we were seeing this massive amount of variance, and we're just not seeing that with paraxanthine. So caffeine, to back this up, is 1,3,7-trimethylxanthine. And therefore, when you metabolize, when you demethylate this compound, you get to 3 other dimethylxanthine. So you remove the methyl group, so it's gone from tri to di. And now when we look at paraxanthine, it's 1,7-dimethylxanthine. You remove the methyl group at the 3-methyl position, which we're thinking is done by the body for a very good reason. We believe that the majority of that demethylation is happening at the 3-methyl position because that is a somewhat toxic position, and it's harder on your body's metabolism. And you see that with theophylline, right? And you could see that potentially with its metabolites. So again, it's not even just that one step, it's the other steps. And there's, if you look at this whole pathway, there's many, there's the single methylxanthines, and then there's these methyl urates and all this stuff that's happening below caffeine when you look at this pathway. So it gets pretty complex. So as far as half-life, you're right. Here's where it gets really crazy. We're told caffeine is around a 4-hour half-life. And you know, this is a little bit faster. Paraxanthine enfinity is a little bit faster, maybe like a 3 to 3.5 hour, depending. So it's a little bit in and out, a little bit cleaner. But the thing is, that's an average. And we're talking a massive variance for caffeine, whereas this is pretty spot on how everyone experiences paraxanthine. But with caffeine, you get people that are hyper fast metabolizers that are like, maybe you're like this, Mike, you're like, I can have caffeine and go straight to bed, you know? And then there's people that it's like me, I have it at like 10 a.m. and I struggle to sleep. And so the half-life of this thing can be very massive. And what happens is, yes, around 80%, if you look up these metabolic pathway charts, converts from caffeine to paraxanthine. But the question is, how long does it take? And what is the rate? And so that's where the massive difference is if paraxanthine's where all the benefits are, how long does it take when you're doing this drip drop conversion to paraxanthine versus just giving paraxanthine and going right to the thing that works? And that's where we're seeing, so not only are you avoiding side effects, but you're getting straight to the benefits. And especially if you're a slow metabolizer, this is going to be massive for you. But we're also seeing, even with fast metabolizers, them see benefit as well, because it doesn't have the adaptation effect that caffeine has. So for these people that essentially the people that are fast metabolizers that can go straight to bed, that's because they've typically adapted so quickly and they need a massive dose of caffeine to get any benefits. And so when they have lower doses, it can almost be like tiring or certainly not effective. And so when you're going straight to paraxanthine, they're getting the benefits too. And so we don't see habituation, we don't see adaptation effects like we do with caffeine. So it's very unique.
Excellent. Thank you. So a lot of times when we read and write about caffeine itself, we say it's like an adenosine antagonist that essentially keeps you awake a little bit longer. Obviously, it can't keep you awake forever. Now, is caffeine, the caffeine molecule, actually doing that? Or is it actually or is the paraxanthine that is being metabolized into, and is primarily metabolized into paraxanthine, is that doing the heavy lifting after we drink the caffeine? Like, what is actually, so I guess my question is, if I take paraxanthine instead of caffeine, am I missing out on any of the benefits of wakefulness that we're looking for? who's doing the heavy lifting when I drink caffeine, and can I still get those benefits with the paraxanthine itself?
Well, maybe I'll go first, Shawn, and I'll pass it to you to go. So it has the data that we've seen and that Shawn shared with us and his team is that it actually has higher binding potency for adenosine A1 and A2 receptors. So that's the other thing that makes it so special is that you have this huge variability, right? That Shawn was talking about, and it literally it's massive. It's anywhere from 1.5 to 10 hours, which is such a big difference. So you have people that they're a fast metabolizer, they're getting the results when they need it, and when they're that slow metabolizer, they're either not getting it when they need it or it's counterproductive. And there's multiple studies now. There's a strength training, mentioned that was presented, Ben, that was actually presented at ISSN, right? That was Dr. Jason Kaliva. He showed that in strength training, slow metabolizer, believe it or not, it's counterproductive. And then there was training that was done in 2018 at the University of Toronto that was then down in endurance. So now we've got this data talking about no matter what type of training you're doing, as great as caffeine is, it is very, specialized on those that, from a genetic perspective, can metabolize it really well. So there is absolutely an element of it. It's not just about, making, you're essentially utilizing your genetics and making this work better for you. There is a power that comes with it. And of course, caffeine has some of its own effects and some of those other ingredients, but paraxanthine is essentially what we think of, and enfinity specifically is the efficacy associated when you consume caffeine. So with our product, for example, we got 300 milligrams in this product. You could potentially have to consume 420 milligrams of caffeine to get that. Then you got to think about the slow drip. When you got it, it doesn't bind as effectively. So there's so many variables there. But to answer your question, it's absolutely unique, in that perspective, and has its own benefits.
And for the record, for anyone listening, in the show notes, we will be linking and citing those studies, and we'll be eventually doing a mega post where we just keep up to date with all the stuff coming out, because I believe Shawn and his team at Ingenious Ingredients are going to be behind or working with more stuff to be published, from what I understand. So are there any, let's talking about studies. Is there anything else to note from some of the research studies?
We can't talk about some of the studies that we're working on in depth yet, but I can tell you that the study, we're doing one on e-gaming for like mental endurance and performance. Incredible stuff. And then we have a weight loss study coming as well that will be pretty stunning. I'm very excited about like the preclinical stuff we've done that's shown us like this thing is far more lipolytic, far more adenosine inhibiting. We're seeing better focus, less mistakes. We're seeing it not have the anxiety induction. And then on this preclinical front with the rodent models that we're now looking into, we're seeing increased BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor for neuroplasticity. We're seeing reduced ROS, and in particular, we're seeing increased glutathione and catalase, which is incredible. We're seeing increased nitric oxide through PDE9 inhibition. The data is just honestly, like, talking to Dr. Ralph and Dr. Martin on the team and Kylin, like we've been in the industry 25 years a piece. We've never seen something that, like, from an efficacy standpoint works this well. And then from the standpoint of like the data just consistently across the board, always working out. Like you do not have, like, I can tell you, like Ralph and Martin and myself, we've worked on probably 40 ingredients. And, you have some studies that look good and some studies that don't. You have some data that looks good and some data that doesn't. And, and you focus in on the things where it is good. And we're seeing everything be good. And like, we're just stunned. Like, honestly, like we all felt like this would be a great ingredient, but it's just stunning and it's really exciting. And I mean, that's why we had to pair up with an incredible partner like Iovate MuscleTech hydroxycut to launch this thing, because they could bring the marketing muscle, they had the distribution for us to really get behind this thing wholeheartedly.
Can I ask, not to come across as a non-believer, but we all love caffeine. We've been using it forever, right? So here's a little bit of a devil's advocate question. Theophylline is a controlled drug. We all know that. It's been explored. And theobromine is a very popular dietary supplement. So those being the other two, metabolites of caffeine, why has paraxanthine never been explored before? And in those ways, if theobromine is just a generic ingredient that anyone can use, what is patentable about paraxanthine? Maybe for people who are a little bit curious about, why is it able to be an exclusive patent for Ingenious? Could you maybe explain how that works?
That was literally my question, because we were
Yeah.
looking at some of the research, and it's from the 1980s. It's been known about. So
Yeah.
thank you,
It's
Ben.
they're great questions, and I get asked this all the time with ingredients I've worked on. Things like, Mike, you and Ben, several of the ingredients I've worked on, and almost all of them, I get that question. And it's the same here. Part of it is, I would say, my partner Kai Lin, he has over 1 million square feet of facility, over 100 scientists, and we can just do things like on a level that other people can't. And then, Dr. Ralph and Dr. Martin are just brilliant chemists that, file all this intellectual property, understand the regulatory on a brilliant level, and get everything dialed in, studies, whether it's our preclinical or our human studies. And I just come up with these ideas, and just I start looking at pathways. And, I had Kylan make this about 7 years ago, and we started trying it, and it was amazing. And I was like, this thing could really be better. And then I started, diving in and seeing, well, some of the data was saying, well, it doesn't occur naturally. And so I was like, well, maybe that's the reason. And if it's kind of a no-go unless you file an NDI, if it doesn't occur naturally. But then I started doing some deeper research and finding that we found about 5 sources. It's very small, but it does occur naturally. And I think, that's some of the reason. And then I think people thought, up until this data, like I was just talking about, is fairly recent on this metabolism difference. And I think people just genuinely thought the majority of caffeine just becomes this. So just take caffeine or take a little bit more. And I can tell you this ingredient costs a lot more than caffeine to make. So that would have been a barrier, and very similar to when I worked on, theophylline and methylliberine, that those ingredients were way more expensive. And, someone like Kylan can work on these ingredients to optimize them in a way I think most companies can't. Whether we're working on fermentation or synthesis or enzymatic ways of making these ingredients, he's brilliant on that side. So, I would say those are the reasons. But honestly, my biggest answer is I don't know. It's kind of mind blowing every time. Every time I'm like, how has no one done this yet? And I don't have a good answer for you. Those are just some kind of answers, but I'm happy about it. And as far as patents, we've filed many patents now around use, around synthesis, around composition, just thinking through everything we can think of, and really fascinating data that we use for preclinical, again, animal models, to really point out what ingredients stack well with it. We actually knocked out 50 ingredients at once, so we could look at what's moving the needle in synergy. So now we've got a bunch of things coming out like that. So very exciting. Love this data. There's definitely some great ingredients that EuphoriQ already has, like tyrosine, that's a dopamine agonist that is going to stack very well with this, obviously. So we're already seeing mood enhancement and dopamine and serotonin. We're actually looking at many neurotransmitters, being affected by enfinity. So there is I would say that's a really different, not only does it feel cleaner, I would say subjectively what we're getting feedback wise is there's definitely a mood enhancement with this dopamine serotonin thing that one of the things that we kept getting early on, like we were giving it to some quarterbacks in the NFL, and we were hearing like this swagger thing. And that's literally, this dopamine reward kind of mechanism that we're seeing. And I would also say, like, another thing that we see is that there's kind of like this afterglow where you don't feel like, usually with the adenosine inhibition, when you remove that, then there's kind of like this, it all comes back in, and you feel kind of this crash or this fatigue. And I think because of the neurotransmitter lift, because of the antioxidant lift, because of the nitric oxides, because of the kind of optimization physiologically that's happening, that you're seeing like this afterglow where like you don't have the crash. And not only that, like I've been hearing back from people on their HRVs with their wearables, et cetera, that they're actually improving when they're switching to paraxanthine. So this is like really exciting, like from that front too, that people are getting better sleep.
Yeah, as a I will say I probably like the top percentile in terms of caffeine metabolizers. I could take a good 200 milligrams probably around 8 o'clock and be asleep by 10, no problem.
Dude.
And I've always
Wow.
been that way. I didn't know this was, honestly, until like maybe 6 years ago, I did not know that you should stop caffeine until, I don't take it past 5 o'clock now, which is still pretty late for a lot of people. But
Wow.
but I've also and I've explored caffeine quite hard. Mike's witnessed me like really explore the depths of caffeine. I get such an incredible lift out of it. And I don't mean literally weightlifting. I mean, I feel amazing on caffeine, and paraxanthine is just a complete different, but familiar. It's very kind of interesting because you can tell when you use it, you're like, yeah, I can tell why this is kind of maybe a fraction of what I feel on caffeine, but it's 100% that good part. So that swagger, I wouldn't have come up with that word on my own, but that is absolutely a great descriptor for how I feel. I take this on a leg day, and you just feel that dopamine rush that you're talking about. And for people like weightlifters who are already very accustomed to that dopamine, that reward of having a great exercise and feeling like you've accomplished something, it seems like it's like a exponential multiplier on that.
Yeah, for those who haven't seen it yet, on YouTube, we have a video that we put on our Discord. You join our Discord at discord.priceplow.com, where a lot of the MuscleTech sent out some samples to beta testers. They had no clue that it was a MuscleTech product, and the beta testers all like nailed it. They were feeling very good. It felt like 300 milligrams felt like 270 milligrams of caffeine to some people. Watch the video, and it was really impressive on the anecdotes that were received on that beta test. I'd like to ask Raza a couple questions. First off, like, how do you go about evaluating this is a brand new ingredient? There's obviously some level of risk bringing in a new ingredient first to market. So how does a company as large as Iovate evaluate and like decide to pull the trigger on such a thing? And then give us some of the anecdotes as well that you're hearing from your side, because a lot of people there have been using it for a longer period of time. And then we can kind of pile in on that as well.
For sure. So when I first got the call, I think it was about 3 to 4 years ago. And Shawn's got an amazing team. It was Ralph specifically. I was chatting, and he'd kind of mentioned it to me, and similar to Ben, what you were thinking. I saw the mechanism. I was like, well, yeah, this makes, this is brilliant. This makes complete sense. But at the same time, for more than 15 years, I've tried every stimulant. I've tried every different combination of ingredients. In fact, for 15 years, I was trying to maximize the benefits of caffeines and stimulants while bringing down the jitters so people could take more and more to get the true ergogenic benefits. I literally, we filed a patent for, theanine in 2010, with it. I tried all the different adaptogens, you name it. We tried everything to essentially, again, allow people to take more, not realizing that there was a little more to it from a genetic perspective, right? And how you metabolize it. But that said, you get habituated, right? So over time, even though you didn't enjoy the experience, for many people, they just, after consuming so much caffeine, they kind of get used to it, which is why, I have a question for you after, Ben, just if you've ever gone like 7 to 10 days without caffeine. We'll come back to that. But that was one thing, again, just from a formulation perspective, we were always thinking about. So what we realized, and the best way I can describe this is like a heightened perception versus caffeine, when you get in the zone and the way you train, with just going straight to the source. But again, when I first heard about it, I'm like, you have to try it, because you never know, can you take something without caffeine, right? I mean, just everyone's so accustomed to taking it in a pre-workout. So I got the sample, I tried it alone, and then I tried it with a few different combinations. And then I was thinking, I'm like, wow, I didn't take any caffeine today, right? Like I didn't either take my espresso, I didn't take another pre-workout, another thermo. And then eventually, Shawn and the team started, kept hearing from me, because I just needed more and more samples to keep trying, because I just loved it. So that's when I knew we were onto something. And once I knew we were onto something, it was like, okay, we have to, this is the most groundbreaking ingredient that, we just have to launch this in a product. And we started getting samples. So it was before we completely, understood, the regulatory side of things. But that said, I had so much trust in, Shawn, his team, that, and one thing I love is they're investing so much, right? So they did all the data that you need to be generally recognized as safe. They made sure it ended up in a food with, nutrition facts panel. Like, that is the way you're supposed to do it. So they were, delivering on quality, which really resonated with our values. And then the science. I mean, I've seen, there's a lot of ingredients, a lot of mechanisms. When you look at the pharmacokinetic data, you look at these, you see all these obvious ideas. But before somebody goes and truly invests, not only invest in the manufacturing of it and making sure that they deliver something with like that purity, that quality, but then go and do the clinical studies. So then we can leverage the claims, because once you get those anecdotal benefits, you try it. It's what can you truly say to the consumer? What can we communicate? And that's the stuff that they've been investing in. So that wasn't there immediately, but that just, the research that they're doing and continuing to do is amazing and coming out there. So, we got there to the point where our business was really comfortable, and we worked really closely. Like, I think there wasn't a detail that wasn't, too small for us to discuss, from in some ways, from a study design, what, other claims we may need, what do we want to unpack? Even to the point, like when we were talking about our Burn IQ product, this is the thermo. One of the ingredients in here is our specific green coffee extract that we standardized to 45% chlorogenic acids that we have 2 human clinicals from 2 different groups showing weight loss. And Shawn, one thing that Shawn and the team were adamant about was like, let's make sure it's decaffeinated. So absolutely, this is decaffeinated. So we got to make sure that we call that out, because we don't want people to get confused with the messaging on how this is differentiated and different. So like all those details, we collaborated on, and for more than 25 years, we've been looking. We've got so many first to market opportunities, and I've been really, really fortunate to have been involved with a lot of those launches, some of the biggest launches in the industry, during that time. And to me, this is the next great leap forward. It really is. It's totally differentiated, which is why we had to get behind it, and it doesn't happen without partnering with someone like Ingenious. So hopefully I answered the question, but we're excited. If you can't tell. So
yeah, and it's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I guess the second part of the question was some of the anecdotal feedback. I'm not sure if you had any extra stuff to say, but before I give my own, I would love to hear what I'm sure there's some people there who've probably gone through maybe 20 to 30, maybe more servings outside of yourself, who's been using it for 4 years.
Yeah, well, I got a 5-pound tub right there, right beside the bottles. That's my personal.
Can we do?
I think I need one of those.
The biggest givever ever.
Good. All right. Well, you know what? We'll figure that one out. We'll get some out there, but we're fully stocked. That's for sure. There has never been as much excitement as there is in our business. There really hasn't been. That's what I love. We got everybody who's tried it. The feedback has been incredible. So I'll start with the EuphoriQ, because we had to we tried so many different combinations, right? And we didn't want to also over engineer to the point where you're just throwing a lot of ingredients on top of each other, just to get a certain label call out. It was, how are these ingredients interacting? I talked about that heightened level of perception. We want to keep that, right? Like, we don't want people to get distracted. We want people to stay in the zone. So, you're thinking about, we're thinking about everything when we came to this formulation. We were thinking about, acetylcholine precursors, But again, we just, there's a certain amount that you want to combine with it. We were thinking the dopaminergic pathway. We were thinking about neuroplasticity with brain-derived neurotropic hormone, which you get from the neurofactor that we incorporated. The catecholamine release to support this with the tyrosine. All that went into it, and new level as well. So again, like thinking about how do you enhance blood flow and blood flow to the brain. And that also has great research on showing its ability in gamers to enhance with certain measures of cognitive accuracy. So we played around with different iterations. There's many ingredients that I tried that didn't end up in the final formula. And it was understanding the science, trying the ingredient alone, and then trying it with certain combinations of ingredients until we'd kind of dialed it in. And then, of course, the next phase was taste. So eventually, once we started noticing a trend, okay, we're onto something here. Version 5A, this is it. After a few, and again, we tried various iterations. But the feedback that we got, and I'll admit, like naturally, when we tell people they're about to get a caffeine-free product, and again, this is not stimulant-free by any means. It hits, but caffeine-free. People start to get skeptical. Can you give me the good stuff? And I'm like, no, you got to try this, right? And then once they try it, and then they all of a sudden notice that, well, this delivered on everything that they experienced and wanted to get out of workout, from strength, from endurance, energy, and focus. And a lot of that, although there is ingredients, of course, we're going to have a couple of the key ingredients that you need in there for vasodilation, citrulline, plus the new level, right? It is in there as well, but again, more nootropic focused. And then we also have ingredients, of course, like your beta-alanine. When you think about endurance, naturally you think about inhibiting, enhancing muscle carnosine, right, to enhance lactic acid buildup, etc. But the whole impact on the brain, right, and going after neurotransmitters to help you push through your workout, that is kind of what gives you that motivation, right, to hit your personal best, to exceed. It doesn't matter what you're doing, lifting weights, doing cardio, whatever type of recreational activity, sport is as well. So those are the things that we started to notice and started to get feedback on. And on the pre-workout, people were just, we had people that didn't like, who were either loved stim, like they could handle high doses of caffeine and yohimbe, taking this and saying, wow, like it was a different experience, but I did not miss what I would typically take. And then you have that other group of people that, that train hard, that either train at night and just didn't want that heavy stims. And they're like, yeah, no, I just don't take pre-workouts because I just don't want that. I got them taking on. I got one employee in particular who was just like, yeah, I won't touch that stuff. He got on it, loved it. So we started just getting all this feedback. And to me, that's exciting because we're here to, transform, people's lives, get them more active, enhance performance. And if they're not going to take a stimulant because they either train at night or they're worried about getting overstimulated, to me, that was game changing. And I'm personally also a slow metabolizer, which is why, it really has changed. I have been hoarding, Shawn always laughs, like I was hoarding a lot of samples initially because it literally was changing things for me. It was changing the game. I could, whether I was working out or not, it was just such an incredible experience. So we started getting really good feedback on the EuphoriQ. The Burn IQ. So, Shawn was talking about a lot of the great science that they're now doing on thermogenesis and fat loss. This is one of my, favorite products, and particularly the sweet heat version. So we've got two flavors. We got a mango chili lime and this sweet heat. So this has, a lot of the key ingredients that you'd expect, but really we talk about it. We call it Burn IQ. It's the smartest way to get shredded. The first product fueled by Enfinity, but we also included Axivite in it. And this experience, like people are trying this and it's like unlike anything they felt before. The rapid onset of the sensory, and we'll have to turn to Shawn in a minute because I always love when he explains how he feels after he takes it, but that combination. So it's combined with phenylcapsaicin. So capsaicin, key ingredient within chili peppers that we all know really well, enhances your core body your thermogenesis, body temperature. That phenyl group really enhances bioavailability. In fact, they've got some comparative data where they show it's somewhere between 4 to 8x versus the standard form. So it's really, really special in that way. It's also got some information on its ability to decrease inflammation markers, particularly in the gut, something known as zonulin. So it's really interesting. And it's also a bioenhancer. So together, you're getting all these benefits from Infinity, but then with that, and there just seems to be, something particularly special that, that people love. But both products are really, we feel like we found the perfect combination ingredients. And again, these wouldn't be possible without Infinity, because to me, that's how we kind of changed the game. Something unlike anything that's been out there.
Yeah, I can say the phenylcapsaicin. It's really interesting that I think there's like some like buccal, like sublingual pathway happening here, because like I'm getting like paresthesis, like similar to like a beta alanine in like 30 to 60 seconds. Like my face, like I feel tingles in my face. I'm like, whoa. This is like there's something very different happening with this compound. That's really interesting. I would love to look at the research. I didn't know about the zonulin thing, because that's like leaky gut. Like you want to look into that. Like that's massive. So that's really cool. But I can tell you, like Raza was talking about, just funny anecdote. Like when I reached out to like his people, we were working on some flavoring things and different things like that. And I was like, well, what do you guys think of it? They're like, we haven't tried it yet. they're like, Raza won't let us. He's like holding, because at that point we had very little. And Raza was like loving it. And that's been the case like across the board. Now, like I think Raza, you were saying like the whole team is on it now, like, right? Like just like from CEO down to mailroom, there's like people that are just like knocking down the doors to try it, right?
Yeah, like our part-time job is basically fulfilling requests now for samples rather than formulating this. It really is off the charts. Like people are loving it, and that's what you want to see, right? I mean, we're creating products that we want to take as well, right? We want our friends, everybody we know in the industry to take, and we're seeing that for sure.
But like Raza and I, like the reason like it's been a game changer for both of us. Like I was hoarding it myself, because this is finally something for someone that's like suffered my whole life with caffeine being like this ugly friend, that like I guess I have to use it, but it f's with me every time I do. It's like, wow, this is like a total game changer for me. And it's awesome to hear, Ben, that like you still have great benefits, even though you're a very fast metabolizer, it sounds like. But for people like Raza and I, it's massive difference. And I can tell you, like, this isn't just a pre-workout. Like, this is funny, funny anecdote too, Raza. If you remember, like the one day, like our whole team came into Toronto to the headquarters to present like our new data. This was maybe a month ago, I think. And we have a lot of data on this ingredient and another ingredient that may be coming soon. And we consume this. Raza's like, you guys should taste this, try it. And, this is the final version. And all of us at the table consume this. And we're like, oh, this is good. This is good. In like the next 2 hours, we went through like 6 hours of work, not even realizing like what happened. And then like later on in the day, we're like, oh my God, that was the EuphoriQ and the Infinity. So I can tell you, just using this, like if you need to crank and get some stuff done, this is it. This is the real deal.
Yeah, my feedback is very similar. I'm starting to get spoiled with this tub here. You can see, so it was just like kind of written on the tub if you're watching on YouTube. Tastes great, by the way. I'm not even sure what flavor this is, but it's incredible. And for me, it's like it's cleaner. So the word most people are using is the cleaner effect. I think I'm a regular caffeine metabolizer. 4 o'clock is usually my cutoff time for caffeine. But when I take it, I definitely have a little bit less of the anxiety. I have a little bit less of the crash, and it is a little bit less crazy. And there are times when most of the time I want that. There are occasionally times where I actually want a hard hit of caffeine. And what I'm starting to see, and this is what other people are starting to say too, is that after you've been using Paraxanthine or Infinity for a while, and you go back to caffeine, like straight caffeine and hydrous, the caffeine feels dirtier. And just dirty is the word. And there are times where that's fun. And then there are other times where like I took some like 300, 275 milligrams of caffeine and hydrous, and I was like, ooh, should have taken the euphoric pre-workout. I was just kind of feeling a little bit roughed up from the caffeine. And so that's kind of like, that's where I'm at. It's not everyone has the budget to have like, tons of pre-workouts in their shelves, but I think there's a time where this is incredible. And there is maybe a time where you do want to get a little bit crazier and dirtier with a little bit of caffeine. But as time goes on, I'm catching myself enjoying the euphoric more often than not. And then, I'll be honest, I used it before just going to a friend's barbecue, and these guys were drinking. I was not. I only had like one dessert shot way at the end, but I was riding high in the euphoric, and like we're having a very intense conversation. And these guys are like classically educated individuals, so I would consider far more intelligent than myself, at least from book smart point of view. And like I was making very coherent, very cohesive arguments where I was not like searching for words. I wasn't like stuttering or stumbling. I was just on point. And so the name euphoric actually, I think it's a great name for the pre-workout, and it's spelled with an IQ at the end for anyone like, listening here. And we'll have all this in the show notes, but it's a perfect name because it does have just those euphoric positives of caffeine, but without like the wild-haired craziness that sometimes caffeine anhydrous can provide. I think so. One question I had back to Shawn, I'm not sure if Ben wanted to say anything else, but it seems that you're not going to allow anyone to formulate this with caffeine alongside. And I'm not sure if that's like a political statement or if there's actual scientific backing, or you don't want it to be like clouded. So I was wondering like if that's what the thinking was on that, if that is the case.
It's more than a political statement. Obviously, there's logic behind the idea of like if we're trying to replace caffeine, like it could be, counterproductive in terms of our marketing, to have caffeine co-administered. But we've already done a number of studies now, and we're just seeing that again, when you stack the two, that we actually see counterproductive results. So that's where our recommendation is coming from. And certainly when you compare paraxanthine head to head to caffeine, every single time, whether it's, side effects or benefits, we're seeing paraxanthine outperform it. But yes, when they're stacked together, it just seems to underperform compared to the paraxanthine administration alone. So, and that's not even including people that may be slow metabolizers and how counterproductive it would be in particular for them. So again, we're just clearing out, if I could show you the whole pathway, we're just kind of clearing out that whole thing and just getting to the meat of it that really matters. And it's just, like you're saying, a clean experience. It's also a clean pathway, and that's what's happening. And it's not just caffeine, theobromine, theophylline, it's many levels. Like I said, you're removing at least 12 ingredients or compounds, I should say. So that's where it's coming from. It's just a wholly cleaner experience.
Are you also not allowing it to be used next to theobromine?
Correct. Yeah. Any of the other dimethylxanthines and caffeine itself. Yeah.
So this is exciting. I honestly, yeah. So as I keep using it, I do think this is like the next big thing. It's kind of interesting because like, where do you go next? Obviously, coffee is a big thing that's not going. I guess coffee consumption may have like peaked or it's a lot of stuff has gone into like performance energy, like cans. I'm just wondering like, what can you do? And is MuscleTech? Are we going to MuscleTech? Maybe a question for Raza, are we going to see this in an RTD or a pre-workout can, or are you sticking with powders for the time being?
Well, without giving it too much right now, I see for initially, you're definitely going to see, more powders, more pills. We're, as you can tell, we're huge believers in this. So we are developing, a pretty deep pipeline of this because, we think it's just that transformative, right? Caffeine's been great until we knew about this, until this was available. So this is where you're going to see it in multiple categories. We've been busy. So more launches to come, but mostly powders and some pills for now.
One of the things when Raza, when you and I talked at ISSN, we kind of got into this topic where I come from powerlifting and bodybuilding background, and a lot of lifters in the pre-workout category will have that background, but there are a lot of general consumers as well that it seems like the consumer journey of pre-workouts just goes higher and higher doses, more hardcore and more hardcore. And it definitely is uncomfortable, but most people seem to find that uncomfortableness as a positive thing in terms of fitness. We have, obviously, it's become a bit of a social media craze to take lots and lots of pre-workout. And I feel like on the back half of that, most of us that don't leave the community stick around to finally find some way to create focus and euphoria and energy through a more natural or more comfortable way. And I feel that a lot of pre-workout is going in that direction. We've seen a lot. Well, we've definitely seen a split in the industry between compliance products and non-compliant products. And unfortunately, that's quite a big divide in the industry. So one of the things that I did when I selected beta testers for our setup was actually to pick a few beta testers that I know for a fact take some non-compliant stuff, just to kind of get that opinion. And it's really interesting because behind that, obviously blind, none of them knew what they were using. Everyone reported this just felt better.
Mm.
And so one of the things that I personally have thought is like that, just that side of the industry where it's, quote unquote cool to be taking stuff that you've no clue where it comes from. A lot of the industry, and Shawn, I see this in your content, we have to warn people about the sources of the stuff. Even though you're buying it at a maybe a reputable store locally, like a lot of the stuff you have no clue where it's being manufactured. So we've talked a little bit about where this comes from with Kylan, and that is one thing that I always want to underline is the safety and the quality of the ingredients that are being created, just from a manufacturing standpoint, maybe not even just like the actual attributes of it. But I love this idea that we have this smart pre-workout coming, because I think there is so much of a large growing community of informed consumers, whether it is bodybuilding, which is obviously a large part of where MuscleTech has always come from, but even just the general consumer wants to be more educated on what they're putting into their bodies now. So I'm really hoping that this ushers in a phase of very informed consumers that aren't just trying to, I don't have a better phrase for this, but crack themselves out in the gym.
On that note, if anyone has any safety data, I'd love to get into that real quickly, because I know for a fact there's this guy named Ben Kane who's going to end up maybe taking a gram of it. Is he going to cause himself like some problems? Well, he's done it with
it's all in the
caffeine.
name of science. It's all...
Someone's got to do it. So, but no, I'm pretty sure you're setting upper limits and everything, but would love to know, like, I'm sure you've compared caffeine, even if it's in animal models or whatever, caffeine to paraxanthine in terms of safety and toxicology. Like, could you share any of that?
Yeah. We already have self-affirmed GRAS. FDA GRAS is very nearly done. So, just from that standpoint alone, we're going well above and beyond a typical ingredient that would be included. And as Raza,
is that published yet, or is that shareable yet? Any of that?
The self-affirmed is the FDA GRAS is, like I said, is very close.
Okay, I'll have to get that. Put it in the notes. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, and so from that toxicology standpoint, like we've gone very far above and beyond. And in all of our studies, we've been looking at safety parameters, looking at heart rate, blood pressure, etc., anxiety, and we're seeing it just dramatic. Like, not significant isn't even the word, but it's about 1/10 the toxicity. Pretty dramatic difference. And so it's a very clean experience, and that's where this is coming from. And again, like, we're exploring all the reasons biologically why that is the case, but we do think that there's obviously a lot of bio-individuality there, whereas I think someone like Raza and myself may experience it on a much different level, not only in terms of benefits, but possibly in terms of, that degree of detoxifying it, versus when we have paraxanthine. Whereas, like, Ben, it's maybe it's not much different in terms of the toxicity. So it's hard to say. Again, there's just so much bio-individuality there, but this is one that I think you can feel very safe trying. If you've used caffeine and love caffeine and used it in a pre-workout, this is safer and more experiential. And right now, our GRAS approval is 400 milligrams a day and 300 milligrams up to 300 milligrams per use. So, that's where, like, if you were using it in a pre-workout at 300 milligrams, we can only recommend one use per day. And if you were doing 200 milligrams, that's where we could recommend that it could be used twice a day currently. We obviously think, given that safety data, that, we can bump this up eventually. But right now, where this came out is caffeine set at 400 milligrams. You can be set at 400 milligrams. That's like when we went through this process, that's where we are. And we think that's a good place to start too. Like, I think where this ingredient is positioned in terms of efficacy, in terms of research, in terms of safety, in terms of the science that's happening here, we really don't want to go, to these extreme points and get into some problem areas. So I think where we're at is excellent. And this dose of 300 milligrams is very experiential in the euphoric.
Yeah, even though
One thing on that I think is really compelling too is the latest study from Texas A&M that the Ingenious group did, where they compared it to caffeine. And this is what I was experiencing, but then when I saw the data, it was just great to see where when they were comparing it and noting that looking at these different cognitive measures, was that although there's benefits to caffeine and they're essentially faster in some ways in processing, the paraxanthine group was making less errors. So if you think about that for a second, right, like we all associate, and I think it almost comes back a little bit, Ben, to your comments too, right? Everyone's looking for something that's really, they want to experiment, they want something that's harder hitting. And to them, it's there's a community element of it, just want to try it, how they feel. But when you just dig into the science and you start to see, well, I could be more productive, right? And it's the state of mind that separates, right, the best performers, the elite. And if you're making more mistakes, I mean, think about that in sport, whatever you're doing, a steal, drop the ball, miss, just whatever it is, right? In the blink of eye, those kind of, and even when you're doing work, like enhanced productivity, like that, to me, I think are some of the big difference makers, which why we're so excited, about this.
Yeah, if euphoric didn't have beta alanine, I'd be taking it in the morning every day. So
Yeah.
something about the beta alanine that you guys use, you're talking to a guy who takes every pre-workout on the market for the content, and something about your beta alanine just makes me tingle harder than other ones.
I got the tingles right now, but I would say it's average tingles for me.
Oh,
So
for me, I was
doing.
in the gym. I took it out of the bottle for the first time on Sunday, and I was just like, I was in the gym like, what kind of beta alanine are you guys using?
Let me get this straight. You can take like a gram of caffeine at 8 p.m., go to sleep, but are beta alanine.
For the record, I was very specific.
More.
I could take 200 milligrams of caffeine at 10
o'clock. Okay.
I thought Ben was hardcore. What?
I know, right?
Well, I think well, what I was kind of getting at before is like for caffeine in terms of like safety, you really get into like GI distress and high heart rate. And a lot of people, that's what they find with caffeine. So I guess one thing I wanted to ask about this distinction, it's not caffeine, but it is technically a stimulant. Can people expect not to have as much of an increase in heart rate from this or blood pressure? Because oftentimes when we talk about stimulants, like this is a very fun conversation I have with a lot of our viewers, a lot of other brands. If you take out the legal reasons, like what the definition of a stimulant is to a lot of people is the raising of heart rate or blood pressure for them. So like maybe a T-creatine or dynamine may not feel as stimulating to them, but like acetylcholine or a theobromine, while they aren't caffeine, will still have a lot of that effect. So outside of our anecdotes, Shawn or Raza, for people that are listening, or quite honestly, formulators that are chomping at the bits listening to this podcast, waiting to use this ingredient, are they going to feel as much of that heart rate and blood pressure, maybe not as much of anxiety, but those physical changes from paraxanthine?
No,
Okay.
they're dramatically lower, like to the point where most people aren't experiencing much of a change at all. Like there may be some dose, especially if there was co-administration, which is hard to say. Like, again, caffeine's so omnipresent that like someone may have just had a Red Bull an hour ago or a coffee, or it gets a little
Right.
squirrely there. But no, in our studies, when things are controlled, absolutely not. Like we're not seeing that the blood pressure differences and the heart rate or the anxiety, like I said. So
Because to many people, that's a positive, right? A little bit of a lifted heart rate is, you see that on your Apple Watch, you're like, good, I'm getting into my, getting closer into that thermogenic range, moving.
And I think you'll see that it is thermogenic and lipolytic, but yeah, you're not seeing as much of the negatives on that kind of CNS front. And I think you bring up a really good point, like both Ben and Mike, that I think for some people it's like attached to like how they experience the energy, and it's going to take a little bit of conditioning for some of those hardcore people to experience something cleaner, ironically, but like they've attached like some of this dirtiness to like, I'm feeling it, like almost like having a headache or the blood pressure, it's like, okay, it's hitting, like, so
Right.
I think there is some kind of reconditioning that will happen there. But I think, Mike, you bring up a great point that after a while of using it, when you go back, it's like, that wasn't so great. Like, so it's definitely some Pavlovian retraining that needs to happen there for the hardcore people. But this is a wholly clean experience. I think people that try it, I'm just begging you guys to try it. You can get samples from iOvate, and this is going to be an incredible experience for you guys that are listening. And like I said, I'm just I used it right before this, and I'm zooming. So I love just using it in general every day.
I'm seeing a whole generational change in this stuff overall. Like you said, that just that Pavlovian. I love that comparison. But you see this with people who, to me, like your heart rate, your blood pressure were supposed to go up when you took a pre-workout, because that's supposed to get you hyped to go do things in the gym, right? Whether you're running or you're lifting or whatever, that was just something that you expected. I see this across a lot of different things, especially Shawn, with yourself. Like, so many people were so used to cutting and bulking, massive changes in calories, but now some people are realizing you can fast for more beneficial in terms of that, like a strategic look at that. You can use berberine to kind of mimic a lot of these effects. Like, so much of these dogmatic views on fitness, whether it's bodybuilding or just actually dieting and losing fat, we're really breaking down a lot of the walls that were so uncomfortable for so many people and finding a lot more of an efficient way to do things, which is really kind of what I was trying to get at before when I was talking about pre-workouts. So many people found this uncomfortable factor of it to be necessary. And it's just an unfortunate thing that, like, you went into GNC, you thought you were walking out with something, nothing against GNC, but you thought you were walking out with this thing that's going to raise your heart rate so much. And that was what you needed to be focused in the gym. But I find I'm even more calm when I'm using this product in the gym, but I'm much more blinders on when I'm getting after it. So I think this is better for everyone, but we might have to do a little bit of reprogramming.
Yeah, we get into some silly memes in this industry for sure. Like, not everything needs to be blue raspberry. Like, certain flavors, certain effects just become very, very copied before it's like, wait, what happened? I gotta throw it way back. I got a few things to say, but I gotta throw it way back to episode 2 of this podcast with Shawn Wells. The first time we really dug in and hit it off. Shawn talked about first off, he that's back when he mentioned that he didn't do really well with caffeine, and he suggested a stimulant-free pre-workout as his favorite pre-workout when I asked him. But also he was talking about imposter syndrome and how a lot of people dupe themselves into this mindset where they don't belong. And it's like you then eventually you look into this research, and it's like this thing was staring at us right in the face. And Shawn brought it out, and so no imposter syndrome needed. Like, go find your thing and do it. It's pretty exciting. I guess. Outside of that, I wanted to see if you could elucidate any of these lipolytic effects anymore. Like, is caffeine really? We've seen some studies show it like frees up free fatty acids and everything, but is it? And it's in obviously a ton of fat burners. Is it really a strong fat burner though? It seems like caffeine just brings an energy component to a lot of fat burners, but if caffeine itself or a fat burner, obviously as caffeine consumption has increased in society the last 20 years, we've continued to gain weight. So I'd like to kind of just know if there's more you can talk about that before the studies are published.
Well, Juan, Raza, do you want to jump in on that, or do you want me to?
So I can start and then definitely fill in the gaps. I mean, we've been formulating with caffeine for 25 plus years, in our fat burner and weight loss products, Hydroxycut. So I think it's definitely been a key component that's added efficacy to the formulation. I would say it's never been, caffeine alone in terms of providing the benefits. Whether it was initially in combinations with, other ingredients that increase catecholamines. But if we look at how it works, right, the data in terms of its ability to increase catecholamines like norepinephrine, increase, your body core temperature, lipolysis, but there's still an activity level, associated that you got to go and do something and burn that. So, you don't want to be, taking it before bed or when you're going to be inactive for a long time. It'll help with your basal metabolic rate, but you do got to do something with that. And then there's so many variables. So, as a formulator, you got to think about, there's that component. There's the thermogenic component. Then there's everything from blood sugar metabolism, right? There's all these other different pathways that you can turn on, enhancing, transport to the mitochondria for things to be burned. There's so much. So I'd say it's definitely not just a standalone. We're super excited. We work pretty closely with with Shawn and the team on some of the design for what's coming next, and we're thrilled, actually, just kind of waiting. So not too much more I know we can share just yet, but I think we're going to definitely see a difference maker from using it. And from a consumer perspective, I'd also say we definitely noticed demand for people.
Well, and especially removing that bio-individuality component to it, right? Like, that's where you're going to see, this work. At least, I'll tell you, like, you would expect that it would work at least as well as caffeine, but for like people like Ben, so I think this is going to be, a great equalizer, and we'll see with the data that comes out. But, definitely, like Raza's saying, the thermogenic effect, the basal metabolic rate, the free fatty acids, but also there is going to be certain synergy with the way that it works with, these other ingredients that you'll see with the enhanced metabolic rate, and things like Raza was bringing up a great point about, like, epinephrine, norepinephrine, things like that, that you're going to see like enhanced benefit with ingredients such as that phenylcapsaicin. And I'm sure I would love to study that better than even single administration. With co-administration, I'm sure you would see the synergy. So that could be fun, is really exploring some of these ingredients together.
I'm really excited to see you guys bring it over to your gaming line, Raza. Your was it XP Sports you guys have?
Yeah, yeah, we do. And I mean that's part of the reason also. EuphoriQ, I think there's a lot of overlap, with this product, just from whether someone's gaming or productivity, which is also kind of why we had the new level in there. But like I said, I can't get all the details, but you're definitely going to see us using, doing quite a bit.
It just makes sense to me. I think that the fitness industry has a problem with caffeine for sure. But I could definitely see, we've come a far away from gamers drinking Mountain Dew all night. We've gotten into, maybe the G Fuels and the specific gamer products, but I know that was a big hurdle for a lot of people. Most people are playing video games late at night because they work all day. And apart from staring at a bright screen until 2 a.m., which is a bad problem in itself, taking caffeine to be focused at midnight is obviously detrimental if you're trying to get to sleep at any point during that night. So maybe paraxanthine can be helpful in that case.
100%.
For sure. It's a vicious cycle, right? Like, you have people that, are taking stimulants, and caffeine in particular, really late at night, for whether it's gaming, whatever they need to do, they're training at night, they don't sleep as well, and then you needed it again. So then all of a sudden you're in this, the suboptimal state.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's circular. You're not recovering as fast. You're not performing as well. And, again, speaking from just, even from a personal perspective, outside of all the great feedback that we're getting, I used to watch the clock. So 2 p.m., no caffeine. And even, if I stop probably at 12:30, that's even better. But I just had to cut it there, where I literally will take infinity, up to 5 p.m. Again, it's still stimulant. So I still, but I'm taking it to 5 p.m. and I'm sleeping. Like, I'm sleeping really well, and I'm a very sensitive sleeper. And, to me, that's where, we did a poll with our consumers, and we noticed that a majority did train at night. So to me, it's just game changing, right? Like, we want you to get the most out of your workouts, but do not disrupt sleep. It's just too important, right? For mind, body, whole mind muscle connection.
Yeah, I always found it was like, you take a don't take a lot of caffeine, but you take a little bit if you're studying, working, whatever it is late at night. And then you have to take melatonin, right, to fall asleep. And then that's a whole that's a whole Pandora's box on its own of that. But you create this just
uppers,
vicious
downers.
cycle. Yeah,
Uppers, downers.
You wake up in the morning, and there's a ton of data backed things to help with that. You know, tyrosine helps with shift work or anything like that. But to have to make it necessary to use that to be productive at all, you know, I definitely think most of us want to follow the path of least resistance and not need these things in the first place. But teaching people into actually having a healthy circadian rhythm is a whole nother problem. So,
and when you don't get enough sleep, by the way, like then you run into like insufficient cellular energy with the neurons. They're insulin resistant. It's essentially like a acute version of type 3 diabetes. And now you're like desperate for energy and you're craving that. So your body is going to think, I need two things. I need like fast energy from sugar or caffeine. So that's what you're reaching for in the morning, hence the Monster, hence the, you know, glazed donuts and whatever it is that people are reaching for first thing in the morning. It's because they're insulin resistant. That brain fog is literally because the synapses are firing slower. So, you know, this again is night and day for that. And if you get better sleep, if there was one thing that I would say is correlated to longer life, and I've talked a lot about that on a lot of fronts, it's better sleep. And there's actually a new study, a guy has like coined the term sleep age, you know, looking at kind of like biological versus kind of chronological age and sleep factors and all that stuff. And the fact that this is going to move that needle in terms of, you know, energy, mood, and focus without having a negative effect on sleep, it's really massive on the quality of life that we're talking about for people, and especially when it comes to metabolic syndrome, because when you chronically get into that state that I just talked about acutely, that's when you're at like 3 times the rate of myocardial infarction, heart attack, and you're at 5 times the rate of type 2 diabetes, and you head down that whole disrupted metabolic pathway. So it has a massive impact on quality of life and aging.
yeah, Shawn, I think you actually used the word how much sleep, but I would even argue like even if you are getting that
Quality.
even if the quality of sleep, because I know
Mhm.
I think I will be the first person to admit that even if I did take 200 milligrams at 8 o'clock and fell asleep at 10:30, we all know that sleep was not good quality sleep, even at that point. We all know people that I did a whole series this year of looking into different sleep aids, and people made fun of me for I liked sleep aids more this year than pre-workouts, ironically. But I agree with you, Shawn. Shawn is sleep is a huge thing. I think it's probably a bit of a controversial opinion, but there's a lot of people in America right now with changing legislations that use a certain plant to go to sleep. I don't want to say the plant because it might get us demonetized on YouTube, but again, using these things to make better sleep, it's never the same thing as just having a quality circadian rhythm and good sleep hygiene. I think a lot of that starts with the issues of caffeine. So I don't know if we have the data to really back the statement, but I'm pretty confident that paraxanthine is going to make an impact on that for us. I know I'm out of questions. I think Mike might be as well. So if you guys have any closing thoughts on this.
Yeah, I'm good to go. So thank you, gentlemen, so much. Yeah, closing thoughts, please do it. I think we've made the case clear. You got to at least try this and give it a 30 serving run or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I'm very excited from that front. Like that's, you know, these ingredients really come from a place of passion for me. Like this was part of my own personal search because I'm not as genetically gifted on many fronts as Ben came. So, you know, I'm coming from a place of, I guess, being hamstringed, you know, genetically. So, for me, this has been a game changer in my personal life, and so I'm really excited for people to try this, to use this for the feedback. I loved like in your Discord or whatever it was, Ben, that like, someone literally said they didn't know the name of the product yet. They're like, I don't know, I just feel this euphoria. And I was
Yeah.
like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Like literally the name of the product here. So no, and I just couldn't be happier. I like one in this conversation with two brilliant sports nutrition influencer minds such as yourselves here with PricePlow and everything that you guys do in the industry and really changing it for the better. across the board. And then, to work with Raza and Iovate MuscleTech has just been really exciting in terms of how they're investing and the way they want to do everything to the letter the right way. And it just aligns so well because we see this ingredient as a legacy ingredient, like for the next 100 years. We've very much, I will tell you, like to the detriment of a lot of dollars, controlled the way this is being put out on the market because we're seeing the long-term vision. And we don't want this to get misused or misaligned with the wrong thing or the wrong people. And so this partnership meant a lot to us. And the way that Raza and the team are going about it is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I got to say, I was super excited to launch this whole thing alongside the name of MuscleTech, because I do think that MuscleTech has maybe gotten the wrong rap over the last couple of years in terms of innovation. I think that it was an amazing move for you guys, and I'm really excited for MuscleTech to have this tied to its name for some time. So, Roz, I know you've been at MuscleTech for a long time through so many different innovation generations. I think this is just another one coming along. So, congratulations.
Yeah, no, thanks so much. I mean, we, we're so excited, here at MuscleTech. Like I said, we got a huge pipeline planned. And something like this isn't possible, right? Unless you're partnering with the best, people with like-minded, that you respect, trust, admire, to do the right thing, deliver on quality, deliver on science. And like I said, it's something that we've been doing for 25 plus years. But I've never been as excited. I can say right now, I think like this is it. This is the most groundbreaking ingredient coming that is completely disruptive, but for all the right reasons. So, really excited to get it out there, get people to try it. And, Ben and Mike, thanks for having us on here. Again, it means a lot. We could do this together. And for everyone listening, you got to get out there, try EuphoriQ and burn IQ.
Awesome.
Spinning around. Here we go.
Thanks again, gentlemen. We
Thanks,
appreciate
guys.
that you've allowed us to partner with you in making this announcement.
All right. Have a good one, guys.
You got it.
Thanks,
it.
guys.
See ya.